I know that a lot of our guys are listening going, no, that is true. This happened. And I'm not saying that sex isn't an issue. What the interesting conversation is here, why is it? Thank you so much for joining us again on Second Act TV. I'm so happy to welcome back award-winning journalist and author Vicki Larson. Vicki, thanks so much for staying over.
Thanks so much for having me, Silky.
Oh, well, we just finished a terrific segment that we'll link to. Vicki is the author of Not Too Old for That: How Women Are Changing the Story of Aging. And yep, that's a topic for Second Act TV, where, the aging process can be quite challenging, not just for women, for men as well. But maybe especially for women in certain regards because of this narrative that has been, that we've been subject to for years and years and years and years. And your book directly tackles changing the narrative of how women perceive aging. One of the chapters, one of my favorite chapters, and one that is a big topic here, is the myth, the belief, and I'll call it a myth because I believe it's a myth, is that women lose interest in sex after menopause or later on in life after midlife. And you build a very great, I mean, it's a terrific case that you build in your chapter, why that is really not altogether true. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I love talking about sex. It is one of my favorite topics. And yes, the narrative is that older women become asexual and they're not interested in sex. And I didn't feel that personally. And I was like, well, why are we told that? Well, throughout women's lives, we are told, well, we can't have casual sex or blah, 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 blah. And there are many women for whom that is true. And there are many women who are sexual beings and enjoy sex and enjoy their sexuality. And so I questioned, why would they suddenly lose that at midlife? Or are they just told that they are supposed to be losing it at midlife, that they suddenly question when something like menopause happens, which actually affects, your whole body, your way of thinking, your way of being. It's a disruption of things, just like puberty is. And it's a brief period in time. And why would that suddenly change it? Our belief and our desire for sex. Not to say that sometimes we might not lose it for a bit, like maybe we might lose it when our children are very young and we're exhausted. But if someone is a sexual being and enjoys sex, you wouldn't necessarily lose it just because you hit a certain age, because our desire ebbs and flows throughout life, with times when we're very sexual and times when we're not so sexual. So there's no real reason that we would suddenly lose it. Yes, the body changes a bit, but that doesn't mean that we just stop losing our interest in sex.
Yeah, the interesting thing here, and we have a quite a large male audience, and I know that a lot of our guys are listening, going, no, that is true. This happened, and I mean, I see it in the comments all the time, and women too, and I don't blame them. I'm not saying that sex isn't an issue. What the interesting conversation is here, why is it? Because there's such miscommunication with all this as well. And one of the things that you explore, when I read it, I'm like, oh, because I just did that in a segment with one of our sexual health experts, is that one of the reasons women lose interest, especially in long-term relationship, is not necessarily that they lose interest in sex, but that they lose interest in sex with their partner.
Well, that is true. And that goes back to the myth that women are naturally monogamous. We're not.
Right.
And when Wednesday Martin has a wonderful book called Untrue, and she busts a lot of those myths about women's lack of sexuality. That is not so. We actually tend to lose desire earlier than men because we get bored. And so we need variety. And variety can mean new toys or whatever, but it also can mean new people. And I have met many, many people who are 20 years into being married and they're like, well, I'm kind of lost interest in sex. And I'm like, yeah, if you had a new lover, I bet you would totally get interested in sex. So that is a misconception. And also another thing about men is that after age 50 or so, many men experience erectile dysfunction. And this is a thing that impacts them and it impacts a couple, the way they feel about sex, what they do in sex. As you age, there are many other ways to explore sexuality. So if that ED is an issue and it can't be resolved, it doesn't mean that you stop having sex.
Right.
Sex is many, many things. And there are many disabled people who don't have use or can't use their genitals the way that abled people do, and they have wonderful sex lives. So
I love that in your chapter. That was really, really interesting. Really interesting how you brought, highlighted that it makes so much sense.
yes, and the reality is we are all going to be disabled as we age in one way or another, maybe temporarily or maybe permanently. It's what happens with the body.
Yeah.
And so if you are going to only see sex as a certain thing, then you're limiting your sex life. And so it's not that women suddenly lose desire. A lot of it is that their relationship is not working in that old way.
Let me go back to something that you said as well, and I want to make sure that we're not coming across here as you should leave your husband and have good sex.
Oh.
That's not what we're saying. However, that is unfortunately the case. It wasn't in my case. And when I left the marriage afterwards, I mean, sex has never been better until after 50. And that's where the myth is, and we want to be able to fix that beforehand, because women are also, in my opinion, largely responsible because they don't communicate what they want or what they need. And I'll put myself in that category. I'm not pointing fingers here. And that's a bigger part of the problem. What's important to me to get across or help get across in with this great book where you put this conversation forward, is that really is more of a belief and myth than a fact. Yes, there are issues with menopause, but those can be overcome just as well as you can overcome issues with ED. And I'll throw it back over to you.
Well, it's very, very important for women to understand their sexual body and what gives them pleasure. The hard part beyond that is being able to express how we would like to enjoy sex with our partner. And yes, a lot of women are not really great at doing that. It's just not something we are really taught. We're not, when we're introduced to sex ed and sexual, it's very rarely about women's pleasure.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of women who, especially, older women now who grew up in a different age. Young women now will have a very different experience when they hit their 50s and 60s. But for boomers and women older, there was so much shame about being a sexual woman. And so we internalize that, and that hinders us. And so if we can't express what we want to our partner, we go through life maybe not enjoying sex, and maybe when we hit menopause, we're like, okay, I'm done. And I tell the story of my friend Eve's mother in the book, if I may share.
Oh, yeah, please.
So Eve had visited her mother who was 90 or 91, in Florida, and her mother was giddy like a little girl, and she could not understand what had happened. And she's like, "What?" And her mother had just had her first orgasm at age 91. Yes. And, we burst out laughing at that, like, oh my God, bless her. But at the same time, it was sad. She had been married to someone for many, many years who, well, they had two children and probably not the best sex life, and because she never had an orgasm. So if you get to age 91 and you've never had an orgasm, it is very understandable that you may decide to put sex on the shelf and just say, I'm done with that. And it's not to blame this on men. It is also to say, women, to understand your body
Yeah.
and learn what turns you on and learn how to express that to your partner.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and we talked about that in another segment, is that the what women have done is let their partner believe, faking it, the whole faking it. They let him believe that they're good, and
Yes.
it wasn't good. I mean, I think you even titled your chapter, I'll have what she's having. That that's the perfect example. You can fake an orgasm, and that's horrible. And yes,
Well,
we are, a lot of us are responsible for that.
oh, it's bad for the women and it's bad for the men.
Right.
It's trying to avoid an uncomfortable conversation that will totally change the dynamic after. So a positive will come from that, but because so many women have trouble with confrontation and we're people pleasing and we don't want to hurt his feeling, and maybe we just like would rather fake it so we can get it over and done with, which is sad.
Yes.
But also, there are many people who just are not interested in sex
Hmm.
throughout their life or maybe at a certain age. And I want to be very clear, that's okay. Part of this new healthy aging or aging well narrative is just as damaging if it forces women to think that they must be sexual beings into older age.
Right.
You don't have to. All I'm saying is that if you have been a sexual woman and you still want to be a sexual woman, just because you hit midlife or older does not mean anything has changed for you.
Right.
Nothing. You are still a sexual woman.
Well, and I'll add to that is that you can actually discover your sexual side after 50,
That is
because
true.
that was me.
Yeah.
And
That's
I've been open with that on other segments. It's just such an important topic and such a quality of life topic. It's very important for me to get that message out, and that's why I really liked your book, where you just you tackle this, that aging is not what it has been. We can change it. We're coming to the end of the segment. What would you like to leave us with on this topic, Vicki?
just that women, we have agency, we have control over what pleases us, and if it matters to us to please, it's never too late to explore what it is that you want. You deserve the pleasure that you should have from being a sexual being, and don't let anyone else tell you that you can't or you shouldn't. You absolutely can, and you will.
Yeah. I agree. Vicki, thank you again. It was a pleasure having you on. There's so many other things I want to talk with you about. We'll schedule some more segments coming up. And I thank you once again for joining us here on Second Act TV.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to our channel. The button is right here. Just click on through to YouTube, and when you see the little bell right next to the subscribe button, hit that too, and we'll notify you every time we launch a new video. See you next time.